What's good, y'all? Today I'm going to be teaching you guys how to make your own designer bowler handbag with this step-by-step tutorial. These bags are great for carrying your essentials and they're a lot of fun to make. Plus, you could make one with just a single big pair of thrifted jeans if you wanted to. I've made one of these before and it's been easily one of my most highly requested patterns, so I figured it was finally time to get you guys the pattern and the tutorial. The pattern is linked below. Once you get it, it'll be emailed to you as a PDF that you can print off at home. It'll come with some extra notes, some guides, and some chances to win some free things. Then this video will have the extra information you need as well as the step-by-step tutorial to help you make this bag come to life. I'll be doing some things throughout this video to customize this bag, but the focus of this video is going to be on making this bag in its simplest form. I would say that this bag is in the intermediate range. However, at the end of this video, I'll go over a few things that can help make it a bit more beginner friendly. These bags are super functional with the rolled handles, the removable shoulder straps, plus they're just a lot of fun to make. I've been waiting for the perfect time to make another one, so I hope you guys are excited too. Let's get to it. All you're gonna need is the fabric of your choice, the lining fabric of your choice, interfacing, heavyweight backing, a number 10 zipper that's at least 11 inches long, 2 swivel hooks and a slider that's the same size, 2 D-rings, then glue, tape, and rivets are optional but recommended. Contact cement and purse feet are both optional as well. Of course, you'll need the pattern too, which you'll print at 100% scale on 8.5 by 11 inch paper, and you want to check this test square to make sure it printed properly. You can start cutting out the pattern pieces now, being as precise as possible. I recommend using craft scissors and not your fabric scissors. Once all of the pieces are cut, you can start matching the triangles, so A1 to A1 and so on, then you'll tape those pieces together. There's some pieces that say cut on fold, and you can choose whether to cut those pieces on a fold or you can print them twice, mirror one side, and tape them together to create the full piece. Regardless, your pattern should be ready to go now. You can start cutting your fabric now. Each pattern piece will tell you how many pieces to cut from each material, so pay attention to that. Take your time cutting everything out. It's really important to be as precise as possible. Once everything is cut, we can move on to some prep work. I'll start by getting my backing on. As you can see, the heavyweight backing is smaller than its respective base pieces. This is because we don't want to sew the backing into the seam. So I'm going to mark a 1/2 inch around the edge of all of my base pieces. I'll be using this to line the backing pieces up, and as you can see, the backing should fit perfectly within my markings. Then I'll go ahead and fuse all of the backing in place. Be careful to make sure it stays in line as you fuse it. You want it lined up perfectly. Since the backing won't be sewn into the seam, I want to add an extra layer of protection to keep it in place. So I'm going to use the interfacing to really seal the backing in. So I'll go ahead and fuse the interfacing on. I like to go around the edges to make sure it's really sealed in. I'm going to make my piping cords now. You'll need to cut 2 strips of fabric that are 1 3/8 of an inch wide and at least 29 inches long, as well as 2 1/8 of an inch thick cords that are the same length. You'll need a presser foot that can get right up next to the piping, which I'll show why in a second, but if you don't have a presser foot like this and don't want to get one, I recommend skipping the piping. I'm going to go ahead and make the piping now, and then I'm going to cut 1/4 inch slits across it, and this is what's going to allow it to spread around the curves. Like I said, you'll need a presser foot that can get right up next to the cord, because as you can see, that's what'll give you your 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And on the same note, if you use a different size cord, you'll need to adjust the width of the fabric strip too to make sure that the seam allowance stays the same. I'm going to move on to the straps now. There's 2 different options for strap shapes included, or you could make your own shapes as well, but I'm going to demonstrate the diamond shape, but you'd follow essentially the exact same process for the circle one. So go ahead and cut out 4 strap pieces from your heavyweight backing if you haven't already. Then cut out 4 pieces of fabric that are at least 3 inches by 4 inches, and you'll go ahead and fuse the backing onto the wrong side of the pieces of fabric. Once they're fused on, I'm going to mark a 1/2 inch from the edge of the backing on each side except for the top of it, and then I'll cut out each piece, being as precise as possible. You can glue or tape the edges in now, so I like to start from the bottom and fold the edge of the fabric 1 inch in so that the edge of the heavyweight backing is now the outmost edge. At this line here, I'm going to cut straight in about 3/8 of an inch on both sides. This is going to allow this area to spread open so the upper and lower part can fold in nicely. So I'll finish folding everything in, then my strap should look something like this. I'm gonna mark 2.5 inches down from the top now on the wrong side of each strap. This should be roughly where the fold is on each side, and then I'm gonna find the middle of that and I'll mark 1/2 inch in each direction. So one mark at 1 3/4 of an inch and one at 3/4 of an inch. Since the rectangle rings will sit in the middle of this area, I'm only gonna glue the outer 2 areas and not the middle, since I don't want to get glue on the hardware. So I'll get glue in those outer areas, then I'll slide the rectangle ring in place and I'll fold the top edge down to the line I marked out. You should have all 4 straps ready to go now, and they should look something like this. On the body piece, you'll see 2 diamonds you can use to line your straps up, so make sure you're positioning them correctly, then go ahead and mark those out. This is where you'll glue them in place. Before I glue them though, I'm gonna mark 1/8 of an inch from the edge around the diamond. This will be my stitch line that I'll follow, and it'll make it easier to know where to pivot. When I sew it on, I'm gonna use a 1/8 inch presser foot. That way I can get up close to the rectangle ring. I recommend using a presser foot that'll allow you to get 1/8 of an inch away. At the bare minimum though, you need to be at least 1/4 of an inch away, if not closer. I'll go ahead and get some glue on the back of the straps and in the areas I marked out. Then I can stick all my straps in place, making sure they're lined up perfectly with my marks. Lastly, before I get to the sewing, you will need to make 2 rolled handles. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go through the whole process, but if you don't know how to make rolled handles, I have a tutorial that I'll link below that walks you through exactly how to make them. For these handles though, I'll cut them at the length of the pattern and do a 1/4 inch fold to create the finished edge on both ends. Then the fold for attaching them is 1 1/8 inch up from the finished edge, so the mark is at 2 1/4 inch, and then the pinch should be 3/4 of an inch up from that. The only difference from what you may see in the video is that I'm gonna sew across this edge here prior to attaching the handles, and I'll explain that more later. Now that the prep work is done, we're ready to get into the sewing, but I have a few notes for you first. First off, I'm gonna be using a 3mm stitch length for all of the seams and a 4mm stitch length for all of the top stitching. Second, I'm gonna be using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance for all of the seams. And finally, since I have an industrial machine, I'll be using a heavyweight thread, specifically a Tex 80 cotton wrapped polycore thread. If you're on a domestic machine and can't use heavier weight threads, just use what you can, it's fine, it'll still come out beautifully. I'm gonna start by sewing the straps on. So I like to start at the bottom, then I'll sew all the way around, following the 1/8 of an inch stitch line that I marked out until I get back to where I started. And I'll do this for all 4 of the straps. Here's a little trick I'm done gatekeeping. If you use heavyweight thread, you can pull the thread ends from where you started and stop sewing through to the bottom side of the fabric, and then knot them together, trim it, and burn it down and seal it. I do this as an alternative to back stitching because it gives a much cleaner look on top since everything is very even. If you're on a domestic machine and you're using lightweight thread, I would just recommend back stitching at the start and stop. Regardless, I'm gonna add a rivet in the middle of each strap. I recommend adding a rivet, double stitching the top row, adding a row of stitching up the middle, something of that nature to add some durability, but it's up to you what you do. I'm ready to sew the lining on now. I added a zipper pocket and a slip pocket to the lining, which isn't actually on the pattern piece itself, but all of the measurements you need for them are included in the pattern, and I'm doing both about 2 1/4 inch down from the top. Regardless, I can match my lining to the base pieces wrong sides together, and I'll clip it all in place. Then I can go ahead and baste the lining on, sewing all the way around 1/8 of an inch from the edge. I'll add the piping now, so I'll start about 3/8 of an inch before the middle mark on the bottom, and I'll start clipping it in place all the way around, making sure the edges are lined up. Then once I get back to where I started, I'll trim the cord so that both ends match up. I'll trim some of the excess fabric, then I'll fold that back, slide the other end in the middle, and clip it in place. This way I have no raw edge and everything lines up. I also like to make this folded edge line up perfectly with my middle mark. Then I'll go ahead and baste the piping cord in place, sewing 1/4 of an inch from the edge all the way around, making sure everything stays lined up as I sew. I'm gonna attach the handles now. There's lots of ways that you could do this, but I'm gonna start with a whip stitch. Let me know if you guys are interested in me doing a tutorial on how I do the whip stitch for handles, straps, things like that. Regardless, Regardless, I'm doing one on the bottom and the top. Typically I would stitch across the top here to secure it, but I went for the double whip stitch instead just to try something new. Since I'm not stitching across the top, I stitched the finished edge earlier, so if you are gonna stitch across the top, you don't need to stitch that finished edge like I mentioned earlier in the video. I'm also gonna add a rivet in the middle for extra durability. This is another option in itself. You could just do the rivet to attach the handle, or just the rivet and the stitch across the top, or some other combination of things. It's completely up to you because this is as much a design choice as it is about durability. Once you've attached the handles, the main panels are done and we're ready to move on to the middle strip. I'm gonna start by sewing the zipper in. You need a number 10 zipper that's at least 11 inches long. I prefer to set up my own zippers because I think it's easier to sew the zipper tape in, cut it to size, and add the pull and stops after, but you could use a preset zipper too. If you need to adjust the zipper or learn to set one up, I have a tutorial that I'll link below. For this pattern, you do need to make sure you use a number 10 zipper. If you use a different number zipper, you'll need to adjust the width of the top strip pieces so that once they're sewn to the zipper, they'll match the width of the bottom strip. I'm gonna start by taking one of my top strip pieces and matching it right sides together with my zipper. Then I'll take one of my lining pieces and match the right side to the wrong side of the zipper. This way, once it's sewn and turned, it'll be a clean finish on both sides. The video of me sewing got messed up, but you'll sew all the way down the zipper, 3/8 of an inch from the edge, and as you can see, that'll give us our clean finish on both sides. I'll repeat this process now, so I'll match my other top strip piece right sides together with the zipper, making sure the two top strip pieces are lined up across from each other. Then I'll get the lining piece lined up on the bottom side. Once again, I'll sew 3/8 of an inch from the edge down the zipper. You'll need to use some sort of zipper foot for this. I'll turn the fabric now, and as you can see, I have a clean finish on the top and bottom, and now I can top stitch both sides. So I'll do the top stitching 1/8 of an inch from the edge on the seam, and this will add extra security and help keep everything in place. Then I can flip it around and I'll do the same to the other side. Once that's done, you should have a clean finish on both sides. I'm gonna go ahead and add my zipper pull and stops now. Remember, you do need to leave at least 3/8 of an inch between your zipper stops and the edge on both sides to keep them out of your seam allowance. I'm gonna add my D-rings now, so I'll cut two pieces of fabric that are 1.5 inch long and 1.5 inch wide since I'm using a 3/4 inch D-ring. Then I'll mark the middle of both pieces on the wrong side of the fabric. Next, I'll get some glue on the wrong side and spread it around. Then I'll fold one edge into the line I just marked, and I'll fold the other edge in so that both meet in the middle. I can sew both pieces now, so I'll sew on one side 1/8 of an inch from the edge, then turn it and do the same on the other side. Now on the wrong side, I can mark out 3/8 of an inch from the edge on both ends, and I'll spread some glue within those outer areas. Then I'll slide the D-ring in and press the two sides together. I also like to baste it quick too, but that's up to you. Either way, I'm gonna get the D-rings in place now. So I'll match the edges and I'll get the D-ring in place in the center. However, one edge is sewn and one is not. So make sure you're putting it in what will be the middle once the other side is sewn with your 3/8 inch seam allowance too, and not where the current middle is. I'll do the same on the other end, except I'm gonna do it on the opposite side. That way when we connect the shoulder strap, the bag is balanced. If you do both on the same side, the bag would tip over as it hangs from the shoulder strap. Once both D-rings are in place, I'll go ahead and baste those. Now for the bottom strip, if you wanna add purse feet, I have some marks on the pattern piece that you could use to add them. Once the top and bottom are done, I can combine them. So I'll take both pieces and match the ends right sides together. Then I'll take my bottom strip lining and I'll match the right side of that to the wrong side of the top strip, similar to what I did earlier for the zipper. I'll sew it now again with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. As you can see, when it's turned, I get a clean finish on both sides, and I'll repeat that process and sew the other side too. And once I've done that, I can turn it, and then I'll do my top stitching on both seams 1/8 of an inch from the edge. So I'll do that top stitching, go slow, and if the area with the D-ring is super bulky, depending what fabric you use, feel free to gently hammer it down before sewing to help reduce bulk and make it easier to sew. You'll do this for both sides, and then you can baste the lining in place all the way around. So also 1/4 inch from the edge all the way on both sides to lock that lining in place. Lastly, I'll cut slits right up to that line I just sewed, and I'll do this all the way around on both sides. This will help the middle strip spread around the curves of the panels. Finally, the middle strip is done and we're ready to attach our panels. So I'll take one of my panels and I'll match the top middle mark mark of my strip to the top middle mark of the panel, and I'll match the bottom marks as well. Then I'll clip everything in place in between, making sure to spread the middle evenly around the curves of the panel. Once it's all clipped, you can sew it. Again, this is where you'll need a presser foot that can get right up next to the piping cord to give you your 3/8 inch seam allowance. You won't be able to see the piping as you sew since it's sandwiched in there, but you should be able to feel the cord, so just make sure you stay pressed up against it. Once you've sewn the first side, you can repeat the process for the second side, so again, matching the middles and getting the panel clipped on, then sewing it on. Sewing the second side will be a bit trickier since it's harder to shift things as you go, but just take your time and you'll be good. Also, reminder to leave your zipper open when you sew the second side since you need that open to flip the bag through later. Now that both sides are sewn, you need to add the binding tape to cover these raw seams. You can use store-bought binding tape or make your own. Either way, the binding tape needs to be 1 inch wide. I'll start by clipping the binding tape on now, making sure it's even on both sides as I go around the curves, and I'll go all the way around back to where I started and finishing with a small overlap. Then I'll sew the binding tape on 1/8 of an inch from the bottom edge. Be really careful to make sure everything stays lined up as you go, especially around those curves. Once that's done, I'll repeat the process for the other side, so I'll clip the binding tape in place all the way around, then I'll sew at 1/8 of an inch from the lower edge. Once you've sewn both sides, it should look something like this with a clean finish on both sides. I can turn it right side out now through the zipper. If you used a heavyweight backing like I did, this part is a bit tricky and tedious, and you'll need to be a bit forceful to be honest, but just take your time and get it pushed through. There's going to be a lot of pressure at times, but as long as everything is stitched well, don't worry, nothing's going to bust open. Once you get it flipped, it's still going to look a bit deformed, so just go around and work the seams out. Make sure everything is really pushed out and that the seams are facing the right way. You honestly should spend at least 10 minutes just shaping the bag once it's flipped. All that's left to do is make the shoulder strap. There's lots of different ways to make your straps and lots of different styles that you can make, but if you want to see how I make a simple shoulder strap, I have a full tutorial that I'll link below as well. Once you finish the shoulder strap, the bag is done. I'm super happy with how it came out. It has some really beautiful details and it was a great way to use some upcycled materials. I did some extra things like the little handle holder, obviously the puzzle pattern, the pockets inside like I mentioned before, and I made these little coin pockets to go on it too. It can be attached to the shoulder strap or to the bag itself. So let me know if you guys are interested in a pattern for something like this. I could do a whole array of sizes for them. Regardless, I think the bag is super fire, but it's also gonna be a very functional bag for somebody to get a lifetime of use out of. I know how much work goes into these bags, so be proud of yourself for making it through. Before you go, I'm gonna teach you a couple more things that can help with making this bag. I'm gonna show you a few ways that you can adjust the pattern, and I'm gonna show you the bag on body so you have a size reference. Like I mentioned before, I would say that this bag is in the intermediate range, but there is some ways to make it more beginner friendly, so I'm gonna run you through a few of those. Since the straps have heavyweight backing, when you sew those on, you'll be sewing through 2 layers of heavyweight backing in addition to the interfacing and fabric and everything. I'm honestly not sure if a domestic machine can handle that or not since I haven't tested it. I think it would be able to, but I do recommend testing that first before committing to it and doing all of it. However, if you need to, you could just skip the heavyweight backing in the straps. It wouldn't be a huge deal. I use the heavyweight backing to help stiffen things and add some structure, but in turn, it does make the sewing a bit trickier. So if you're not comfortable with it, you can always skip that or just do some extra interfacing or something instead. I also add the piping to help add structure as well. You could use store-bought piping or something if you wanted to. If you're not comfortable doing piping, you could always skip that as well. Like I said though, you will need some sort of presser foot that can get it right up next to the cord. So if you don't have that and can't get one, or if you're not comfortable with it, just skip it. Here's the bag on body. For reference, I'm 6'4", and this is the shoulder strap at its longest length here of 48 inches. You could choose which length you do for your strap. I truly love this bag so much. I think the details on this bag came out so well, and there's so many ways you can customize this bag by adding things or putting your own twist on existing elements. If you want to adjust the height or width of the bag, I'd recommend cutting the pattern in half down the middle. So let's say you want to make it 1 inch wider. I'd cut it in half vertically, then add a 1/2 inch to it, duplicate that piece and tape it back together, which would give me my full inch. Just keep in mind you'd have to add 2 inches to the total length of the middle strip. Since the middle goes all the way around, it'd be an extra inch on the top and the bottom. If you want to adjust the depth of the bag, you just add or subtract however much you want from the bottom strip piece. Then you would just add half that amount to the top strip as well. That way, once both top strips and the zipper are sewn together, they still match up with the bottom strip. Just remember, if you make any changes, you'll have to adjust the respective backing pieces as well so that everything still matches up. I hope this tutorial was easy to follow. I know this pattern has its fair share of intricacies, so feel free to drop any questions you have in the comments and I'll do my best to help. If you want to see some of my other work, I'm also on Instagram and TikTok. And if you want more tutorials like this, make sure to subscribe here. I'm going to be posting at least once a month, hopefully more. And I'm also going to be doing giveaways for people who purchase my patterns and even people who just comment and subscribe on here. So have fun making your bowler bag. The end result is going to be worth the time that you have to put into it. So get creative. I can't wait to see what you guys make. I love y'all.